Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining our panel discussion today. This is going to be a first in a series of conversations around the workplace that we are intending to broadcast over the coming weeks and months. Workplace, as we all know, is probably one of the hot topics on every boardroom agenda. It certainly is with every customer that I speak to. Workplace and the return to the workplace is key. It's great to be talking to you today on Earth Day, especially as today's topic obviously is around sustainability and the sustainable workplace. So I'm pleased today to hand over to Cathy Hayward, a well-known figure in the FM industry, to lead this debate with three of my great ISS colleagues, Geeta, Jamie and Fran. So enjoy the debate today. Please give us some questions and we look forward to carrying these on in the future. Thank you. Cathy.
Thanks for the introduction, Simon, and also I'm delighted to be here on Earth Day. For those of you who don't know, it's an annual event celebrated around the world to demonstrate support for environmental protection. I'm here to facilitate what I know is going to be a really fascinating discussion about creating a sustainable workplace. As Simon said, my name is Cathy Hayward. I'm the founder and chairman of Magenta Associates, the communications agency for the built environment. And before that, I launched and edited FM World magazine, now called Facilitate, for 7 years. So I've been writing about FM and the workplace for the best part of the last 2 decades. So just some brief housekeeping before I introduce our panel. Please can you remain on mute throughout the event. If you'd like to put a question to our panel, which we really encourage you to do so, then please type it into the chat function at the side of your screen and I'll put it to the relevant person. The session is being recorded, just so that you're aware. So if you're not happy with that, then please stay on mute and don't put a question forward. So today we're going to be having a 25 to 30-minute discussion around the topic of creating a sustainable workplace. And then our panel will use the remaining 15 to 20 minutes to answer any questions or engage on any comments that you may have. So as I said, please get your thinking caps on now and start to put some questions into the chat function. So let's start by finding out a little bit more about our expert panel. Geeta, can I start with you? Can you introduce yourself and explain your area of expertise in a couple of sentences?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Cathy. I'm Geeta Andersen. I'm the global head of Signal, which is the workplace advisory consulting inside ISS. Advising around all the future of work, especially here post-COVID for clients around the world.
Thanks, Geeta. Now, Fran.
Good morning, I'm Francesca Ruiz. I'm a member of the UK and Ireland SLT and responsible for workplace in the UK and within my remit also for our own properties and real estate.
Lovely, thanks, Fran. Finally, Jamie.
Thanks, Cathy, and good morning, everybody. And yeah, to all our listeners, happy Earth Day. My name is Jamie Hall and I'm the UK Director of Energy and Sustainability. And my focus is really on supporting ISS's customers with their own sustainability goals and objectives, but also helping navigate what that means for ISS as an organisation as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. So, right, let's kickstart our discussion. So just to kick us off, Jamie, could you give ISS's definition of a sustainable workplace? So we're all kind of talking from the same baseline. What does a sustainable workplace encompass? And also, how is ISS embracing Earth Day, apart from obviously this webinar?
Yeah, thanks, Cathy. I guess from an ISS perspective, it's a really exciting time for us, and Earth Day is a special day in the calendar because, given the nature of our business and the role that we play within our customers' organisations and in society in general, we're fortunate enough to have a bit of a double-edged opportunity to make a real difference when it comes to creating sustainable workplaces. So firstly, we're adopting sustainable practices across our own buildings and across our operations. And a good example of that is that in the UK, we're kind of due to announce a range of ambitious sustainability commitments in our pending corporate responsibility report. And that's going to cover carbon, water, waste, and renewable energy. And I want to wait for the formal launch, so I can't tell you too much more about that today, but it's something that we're really excited about and passionate about as well. And then the other side of that is that we, you know, from a secondary perspective, we also get to support our customers achieve their own goals and ambitions as well through our services and the solutions that we offer. And as you know, the world's leading provider of facility services, we're perfectly placed to help our customers. And that can be, you know, anything from helping them to define the strategy up front, or it can be indeed by kind of helping them to deliver the desired outcomes. I guess the other part of your question then is how you define a sustainable workplace. I think the first thing I'd like to say is, you know, it's quite a broad subject, and that will mean that naturally the definition will vary from person to person and from business to business. But I guess the key word that I'd call out is balance. So if I was to put a definition on it in a couple of sentences, I'd probably say that, you know, a sustainable workplace delivers long-term value for its stakeholders. And it does that by achieving a healthy balance between minimizing its environmental impacts and its use of resources, whilst also maximizing kind of societal benefits and enhancing the well-being and productivity of its people. Yeah, so that would be the definition, Kathy, that I would go for.
Okay, that sounds a really good one. I do like the idea of balance in all things. So Fran, can I go to you first now and ask for your take on creating a sustainable workplace, perhaps from this kind of the property and user experience? What should employers be thinking about as they plan the future of the workplace in their organizations?
I was just saying that it is great to see all the news this morning, basically with out there, you know, with all the great initiatives that they are. So now on your question, well, employers now know that sustainability is not an optional topic. It is a necessity in any workplace or property agenda. So, and perhaps, you know, this answer would have been very different over a year ago, because currently we have a really challenging macro context. I mean, for sure, the biggest concern of every property manager at the moment is the optimization of the real estate and workspace. There is nothing less sustainable than large empty buildings consuming energy and potentially producing huge amounts of food waste. So at the same time, we know that most employees will now go back to their pre-pandemic behavior, so things have to change. Now, a lot of customers already have the intention to reduce space, but not all of them have the option because, or in the short term anyway, because when they look into their leases, and they realize that perhaps the cost of reducing or exit or dilapidating is actually greater than staying in the building, they have to consider alternatives. So what we have seen recently is a huge amount of interest in transforming the workspace, because those areas that used to be very bland, they're now being converted into exciting destinations for the employees with a focus on collaboration, on creativity, and certainly social interaction. And that's the time when now then property managers are considering introducing more sustainable initiatives as they are upgrading their spaces.
Okay, brilliant. I think it's. I think we'll probably come on to talk a little bit more later about the impact of COVID on sustainability, but it's certainly a really wide topic. So, Geeta, finally, from the workplace design perspective, what can organisations be doing to make their workplaces more sustainable?
I think for sure, not only looking into the building physical sustainability, but also the social sustainability. That's a very, very people-centric agenda, bringing better balance in the learn, work, live agenda. Not only this generation, but the next generation entering the job market, they really want to contribute to a much more sustainable work life. And they want to be part of a force for good that really puts sustainability on the agenda, not only on an overall strategic focus, but really also on a day-to-day basis where you can feel you contribute to a better world. So social sustainability is much more than table and chairs and workplaces. It's all the things that's around the workplace. It's about mental and physical well-being. It's about great onboarding programs. It's about being part of a social and professional community at work. It's about how you tap into the local community, etc., etc. And we already know and can document by dealing with social sustainability, people-centric design, sustainable design, you can get multiple times of the return on investment with the things you invest up here. So I actually, by heart, really think that we have an open window to the sky now to really innovate and do better and beyond when looking into the workplace for the future.
Yes, it seems very much you're picking up on Fran's point there about this being such a great opportunity as we emerge from the pandemic to really focus on sustainability. Going back to you, Jamie, as ISS's Director of Energy and Sustainability, can you give us some tips on how organisations can create a sustainable workplace?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kathy. I think the first thing I'd like to say, and kind of building on what Fran was describing there, is that most organisations now are facing, a lot of pressure in terms of kind of building their sustainability agenda and having a really compelling story to tell. And there's lots of reasons for that. Obviously, there's public opinion and awareness of this topic is at the highest that I've ever known it. Customers are demanding more from the organizations that they choose to buy with, and that's obviously, or buy from, and that's shaping consumer habits. And then you've got things like investors as well, demanding transparency and divesting away from companies who are just not playing ball and not facing into this. So then you move into everything that Geeta was just describing there about the employees and some of the benefits that it can deliver, and sustainability is is almost the green weapon in the war on talent as well. So I guess there's lots and lots of reasons why organizations need to be looking at this. And when it comes to creating a sustainable workplace, I guess it is a multifaceted challenge, and it's going to impact all parts of the business, and the business needs to come together and look at this holistically, as opposed to in the silos which we've managed to create, I guess, as businesses have naturally grown and developed. So when it comes to the workplace, I think you've got to try to embellish the workplace strategy as part of an overarching sustainability strategy. I guess that would be the key thing that I would focus on, and that's about establishing your level of ambition and defining your focus areas and developing a credible strategy, building a narrative, and having that kind of compelling story to tell, as I just mentioned. And once you've got that, I think it's vital that you engage your stakeholders. So take your employees, your customers, and your suppliers on the journey with you. And then it's all about measuring and managing your strategy and shouting about your successes and failing fast as well. And just having the appropriate governance and transparent reporting around, the strategy. And then when it comes to individual workplaces, again, each workplace is going to be very, very different in terms of its physical characteristics or the commercials around that particular workplace. And what I mean by that is, no two buildings are the same. And when you're looking at workplace strategy, you've got to consider the commercial element as well. So is the building owner occupied? Is it landlorded? And what's the lease length? And is the landlord willing to invest? What location is it? Is it in a city centre or a regional hub? Does it have things like, what's the size of the building? Does it have access to parking? Can you put solar on the roof? How efficient is the building today? And what's the condition of the assets in the building? And what's the age of those? I think all of those things are variables, but that's not to say that you can't look at each building and each workplace on an individual level and take a pragmatic approach using an evidence-based standard or process to make sure that you can maximize the output from each individual workplace. And as I say, there are lots of standards that you can follow to ensure that you're doing things consistently. And I guess the final thing I'd say is about kind of selecting the right partners, because I think it's impossible to do this on your own. For a lot of our customers, this isn't core to their business, and there's often a number of partners out there that you're going to need to work with in order to make your sustainability goals and objectives a reality.
Yeah, absolutely. There were some great nuggets there. I think I like the idea of your sustainability policies being kind of the green weapon in the war for talent. I think we've heard a lot about the war for talent as people return to the workplace. So that's a really positive thing. Fran, over to you. How can organisations create the more sustainable workplace from the user experience perspective?
Well, we can talk a lot about workplace experience in general, and we will cover many aspects, I guess, in future meetings and webinars. But in the context of sustainability and in the spirit of creating the right experience for our users, we need to think about the employee expectations, I would say. So it is fair to say that the lines between work and personal life have blurred since COVID. So our people are users in buildings, but they're also consumers in general. So they have choices, they have behaviors at home. And I guess to make them feel comfortable in the workplace, we need to support them with their choices, whether they drive an electric vehicle and they expect electric, charging at the building, whether they do a lot of recycling at home and they expect similar practices in the workplace, or whether they expect fair trade coffee or plant-based food or simply, LED lighting, in the building. Those are things now that they expect them at home as well as in the workplace. So to architect the right work experience, we need to also understand the occupants. Jamie mentioned that there are not two buildings that they are the same, but actually there are not two types of occupants that they are the same as well within the building. So in terms of profile, we can give an example about generations. If you compare the expectations from Generation X to the millennials or the more, the younger now, Gen Z, as they call them, their approach to the planet is very different, and we need to cater for them, and we need to think like they think.
Yeah, I think that's quite interesting, isn't it? As Jamie said, no two buildings are the same, but also no two generations, people are the same. They all want different things. So something that Jamie touched on at the very beginning, Geeta, long term, what impact do you think that COVID is going to have on the sustainable workplace? We're hearing about many organisations are rethinking the way they use their workplaces post-pandemic. Do you think COVID is going to help or hinder the sustainability cause?
I think what is happening now is really increasing the focus on sustainability. And if we look at it high level on a real estate perspective, you can almost see there is a global force that is investing in sustainable impact. There is really a force for good here and making money wise, you could say. So it's a huge global change in perception on where we need to put our money, because we actually now can document that this impact investment is getting multiple time on return on investment, also on the sustainable agenda. And then I think because we can see that is something being discussed with a lot of our clients at the moment, that the companies will occupy less space. It's not something that's going to happen tomorrow, because we are all, linked into lease contracts that will run a little bit down the road. But it will come for sure. Everybody is looking into it, because we are spreading out the hybrid formats for work, more from home, local community, other kinds of hub membership. And that is actually a very, very sustainable agenda, actually looking into not, overuse a lot of things. We will see a lot of offices activity will be redistributed within and between cities and remote hubs to tap into labor markets. And that's also tapping into the social sustainability, because, avoiding commuting 3 hours every day is something you can invest directly in your family life. How nice is that? So maybe the happiness index will also go up at the same time. So a lot of things is going on meta level. And as I talk about, when we enter the individual workplace offices, all our clients is at the moment discussing what is the future point of an office, because everybody wants people really to join there, because that's the glue. That's where we are celebrating the culture, work together, interact, and collaborate and innovate and communicate. So there really needs to be something to show up for. And as Fran says, that has a lot to do with great curated experience, and not in a one size fits all, but in an individual, on demand, curated service experience with a range of offers that also taps into, co-create with the local community. So I think it's going to be much more fun to be part of in the future.
It sounds great, and I think, as Fran said, at the moment where we are, we have lots of large empty buildings, which is very unsustainable. So it's a very positive thing to talk about, using the pandemic as a bit of a springboard to improve all our sustainability. Thanks everyone. I think that's been a really good way to kick us off. I'd like to now open up the discussion to our audience. Please start to think about questions, put in some questions into the Q&A on your screen, and I'll put them to our panel. While you think of those, I've got a couple more questions up my sleeve that I wanted to get the answers to. So I think you could all probably answer this, but Fran, you touched on this earlier about the user experience. Sustainable workplaces are really only as good as the people who occupy them. How can we incentivize people to act in a more sustainable way?
Well, I think we need to make it very clear that the sustainable agenda is not an employer agenda, it's not a property manager agenda, it's everyone's agenda. So I guess part of it really is about making that very clear to the employees that we are all in this together. It's also about communication, because I think we have been in the past, it's something that has been done behind the scenes. So now people now want to know, the recycling cycle. They want to know whether we are using green energy. So I guess a lot of it is about inclusivity and also about communication.
Okay, Jamie, any views on that?
No, I think it was a great answer by Fran. I think, I think there'll be just as an equal amount of pull from employees going forward. As I said, kind of public awareness and public opinion is definitely the highest I've ever seen it, which means that employers are going to be kind of almost demanded to make the changes, and that's that is the real positive. I think communication is key, and shouting about the successes and being proud of the mission that you're on as an organization. I think that's going to get people excited, and there's lots of ways you can engage your staff and get them incentivized, and take them on the journey with you. But yeah, as I said, I think especially with the generational shift that we've touched on already today, I think it's going to be just it'll almost become habitual. It'll be built into the culture of the organization, and I think that's definitely the way that it's going to unfold moving forward.
And we've got a question which has come in, so let's put that to the panel. The question is about ratio for desk usage in sort of future workplaces. Who would like to answer that?
I can give it a try, because we have a lot of data, collecting data on this, among others, for 20 years. And just to compare before the pandemic, in average, if you look into a typical knowledge worker and put all the global data in a basket, we only used our desk in average between 30 and 55% of the time. And I think we can agree about this. This data is not going up. It's probably going down if we are going to spend more time on other hybrid format. So for sure, there is a very sustainable opportunity to bring in desk ratio. It has also a lot to do with knowledge sharing, because we actually know that the more time you spend proximity to colleagues, the more knowledge you share, and the more you increase the social sense of belonging. So it has a lot to do with a lot of other things. I mean, if there's more than 30 meters between colleagues, the knowledge sharing drops down dramatically. So it's both a very building physics sustainable agenda, as well as knowledge sharing and the social as well. So challenge the desk sharing for sure, bring it in.
Fran and Jamie, any additions to that?
Well, I would probably add that the evolution clearly is to reduce desks, as we evolve workplaces from a location to a destination. I mean, if I give you an example, we are at the moment renovating our own London office. We've already, first of all, we reduced the space, we utilize the time, within our lease. It was the right time at the right place to do that. But more importantly, what we have done is reduce the amount of desks by 40%. But we've doubled the amount of collaboration spaces, and also now working about, a work mode. So, for example, creative rooms, project rooms, thinking more about how employees want to use the building moving forward, because that will attract basically our colleagues into the building, and therefore, it will be able to encourage, not having empty buildings and being more sustainable.
I've got a good question which come in, which I think Jamie would be ideal to answer. It's, what do you think matters most to colleagues, and what should be the priority? So is it energy transition, waste reduction, social impact, well-being? There's a lot of things organisations could be tackling. What do you think matters most?
That's a very good question. I think what I'd probably say to that is that it's difficult to single out any of those kind of metrics or campaigns and say any of them are more important than others. I think depending on business to business, I think materiality makes a big difference here, because depending on the type of business you're going to have and the sector that you're in, you're bound to have a different environmental footprint to other organizations. If you're a manufacturing business, your footprint's can be very different to that of somebody in financial services. So I think it's really kind of looking at your environmental impact and the role that you play in society, and figuring out how you can best maximize that, creating that balance that we were talking about earlier. And there are bound to be some things that are going to be high up on your agenda that might not be as important to others. So yeah, that's probably what I'd say to that.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Jamie. A good question here. What are the common challenges organisations face when trying to create a sustainable workplace? I think probably each of you could have a view on that. So, Fran, can I start with you?
Thank you. I guess the challenges are probably around the at what point can you implement the technology that you want? So, and also the fact that you can just not sometimes make decisions in isolation. So if I'm thinking, for example, about EV charging, for cars, well, you depend with dialogues, with landlords. You depend whether you are the owner of the land or you are not. So a lot of the initiatives they require are, great capital, investment as well. So actually now is the right time to do those things. The government really is supporting these initiatives. There is now a scheme for the next 2 years. Is called the super deduction. It's not a check upfront, but it is a tax relief scheme that actually the government is supporting to implement very sustainable initiatives in the workplace. So now is actually the time to do that, but or to consider it, but at the same time to consider those initiatives when you are doing probably a wider renovation, because patching here or there is not going to make a big difference. So it needs to be done strategically.
Okay, thanks, Fran. Jamie, common challenges, what would you say?
Yeah, I think just to build on what Fran was saying, I think some of the biggest challenges that I come across when working with customers is some of it's just about getting started and knowing where to start, and having a baseline and knowing, what's important to your organization, where you should be focusing. I think some of the other common issues that you come across are when you're talking about a broad sustainability strategy, it's getting that common view and that consensus internally about where you should, what the direction of travel should be. Getting, and that needs to be done from, the top down, and you need obviously the board to rubber stamp your strategy. And then once you've got the strategy, you've communicated it, you've got everybody excited about it. Actually, it is harder to deliver these things than you would probably anticipate, because a lot of these changes are transformation. If you take something like net zero, and that's obviously a very popular topic at the moment, and something that we're helping customers with, as I say, and it's because of the way that businesses are structured and the siloed approach to things. You might have things like budgets sat in different parts of the organization. You might have responsibilities sat across different functions, property or finance or whoever it might be. So getting everybody joined up and working together, and almost unpicking some of those obstacles that we've created in the way that we've structured businesses, I think is something, and actually dealing with change and that transformation as a program is something that is often difficult to do as well, because change is difficult for most people to deliver, and unfortunately the bigger you are as an organization, the more challenging that can be sometimes. So yeah, getting that consensus, dealing with the change, and then I guess making sure that you take people on the journey, and that's not limited to your people. Obviously, that's a massive part of it, but your supply chain as well is obviously going to play a fundamental part in it, and yeah, taking them on the journey and choosing the right people to work with that share a similar vision to you is something that I think will certainly help.
Okay, brilliant. Anything else from you, Geeta, that you can think of in terms of challenges?
Yeah, I can make it very short because time is running. I actually think we need to look at this change management and challenge behavioral design quite a lot, because we all want to do good when it comes to sustainability, but when it comes to the actual day, we are really struggling to change our habits. And in my, imagination, just imagine all the great ISS colleagues being outside around the world on all the many workplaces, if they were the force for good and actually the change agent that was showcasing the change in behavior we all need to challenge ourselves, and actually went ahead and showing all the other employees on site how to implement a much more sustainable working, living balance. I think we could really, create changes very fast. So bring in behavioral design. It's about challenging our existing behavior to a much more sustainable focus.
Absolutely. I've got a question which come in, which I think is one we should end on a little bit later, but I'm going to give it to you now so you can start to think about it, because it's a slightly trickier one. In one word, what is the key ingredient to a sustainable workplace? So I'm going to leave that with you. One word, which is a key ingredient to a sustainable workplace, and we'll come back to that at the end. But in the meantime, we've got a question about, well, there's quite a few questions about how we can encourage customers and colleagues to make workplace sustainability a priority. So I think that probably goes back a little bit to some of the challenges you've mentioned. But how can we kind of sell that sustainability dream both internally and externally? Jamie, can I start with you?
Yeah, I think there's probably less of a need to kind of sell the dream, as I was saying earlier. I think for me, it's almost becoming the norm, and it's something that is demanded of us instead of something that we've got to kind of push down people's throats almost. It's something that that pull is definitely there. I think if you do tell the story properly, you can show that actually there are lots of benefits, for employees, for our customers, and for the suppliers and the other stakeholders that we work with. So yeah, I think just having that strong message behind what you're doing and really articulate the benefits. If you take the work that we've been doing in the UK that I kind of briefly touched on earlier, we've shown that through the strategy that we've written that there are business benefits for doing it. So there are financial benefits for us acting more sustainable as an organization, and that obviously helps a lot of the internal conversations. But then there are numerous employee benefits as well. Some of those are financial. Some of those are things about kind of access to work and flexibility and things like that. So there are a number of benefits. So just understanding what those benefits are and weaving that into your story is definitely going to help you along the way. So
really constantly communicating what the benefits both for individuals and organizations are.
Yeah, exactly.
Fran and Geeta, do either of you have anything else you'd like to add to how we sell the sustainability dream?
Well, I actually think it's really important to document and start measuring it, because we, as I said before, we all want to do something good here, but there are so many rumors and stories, and it's sticking out in all directions about what really improves the sustainable agenda. So we need to be able to measure it and document the real impact. So we every day when we show up at our workplaces actually can see we contribute, maybe in baby steps, but if all of us taking the steps, it will be bigger steps and bigger steps. So measurement, documentation is really important. So in our strategy, start to link it to how to measure it and document it.
Okay.
I'd agree with that. Absolutely, having a clear plan and measuring it so that you can track your progress, you can shout about the successes. Sustainability strategy is nothing without data. So yeah, you're absolutely right there.
Fran, earlier on you talked about, and we've discussed then, the importance of communication. We've had a question come in about whether ISS has an information campaign that can support the sustainable workplace.
Well, that probably would be more for Jamie, I guess, to respond. I mean, from my point of view, really is it needs to be a we. It needs to be really something between, I guess, us as a business, us as employees, but also with the customers, because it is our combined responsibility about the workplaces. So I guess it's about bringing it to the agenda. From a campaign, we do regular campaigns. I know that Jamie now, as part of the new function, he has created a lot of, good documentation, and part of it really people are apprehensive sometimes to talk about something they don't know much about it. And I think for us, really, as an employer, as a workplace business, we need to make sure that our employees are very conversant, they're very comfortable talking about it, because then they will be comfortable to raise it in the agenda of the client meetings, and that will help in itself tremendously.
Jamie, would you like to add anything on there in terms of how we can, as ISS, can support clients with communication?
Yeah, I think it comes back to kind of the previous question, really, about having the strategy well documented, with the clear outcomes clearly defined, and the deliverables well articulated, and then having the data to back that up. I think the days of having a tick box exercise for in terms of sustainability and that kind of compliance view are long gone, and there's now a greater demand than ever for transparency, and you're going to need to collect that data to evidence whether you're getting external validation and accreditations that underpin your strategy. That's something that is very common, and actually I would certainly recommend identifying the right external accreditations that you want to underpin your strategy. But that data, once you've got it, as Geeta was saying, is really important, because you can then share that internally with your employees. You can share that with your shareholders, whoever that might be. It's having that kind of evidence base, and once you've got that, you can use it for a number of different
Absolutely.
opportunities.
We've had a good very specific question here come in, which is quite an interesting one, about the single-use plastic tax that the government is introducing next year. How do you think that is going to affect your sustainability goals that we've talked about today, and also how it's going to affect a client's sustainability goals? Who'd like to start on that?
Yeah, without telling too much about our targets, okay. all I would say is, I don't want to spoil the launch, but all I would say is that waste management, recycling, eradicating single-use plastics, all of that forms part of our plan as an organisation, and it's absolutely something that we would recommend and do support customers with on a daily basis through our waste management services. So I'm going to try and stay tight-lipped on what it means.
So that's a watch this space, perhaps.
Yeah, that's it.
Quite a question coming here about clients' budgets and P&L, and whether finances or lack of is a barrier to delivering sustainability targets. What's your experience of working with perhaps some of ISS's customers? Is the P&L a barrier sometimes?
I will probably start with this. I don't think it is. I think it may be in the short term, but also some of these decisions that don't need to be done this month or next month. Is more about being on the agenda. It's more about understanding where we are, where we need to get to, what the journey is, how long it's going to take. As I said earlier, some of the decisions can be done, in a matter of short, medium, and long term, because some of them are very related to real estate. So I don't think it's a barrier personally. I think it's more about understanding that it is a necessity and it's non-negotiable. It's not okay not to talk about it and not to put it on the agenda. So
okay. Go on, Geeta.
I think it has also a lot to do with information and communication, because we can already now document that making a sustainable investment has a huge impact and multiple times return on investment, as well as the social sustainability. We can also document that. So I really often experience that there is a lack of information about all these things. So you can focus your investment, and by investing something here, you will get multiple times of return of investment here. And I mean, the knowledge and the way to go there already exists. We just have to start doing it.
So finance is not a barrier then. It's not something that 50 years ago it was.
Exactly. And I will repeat also what I said earlier, there are really wonderful schemes out there. So they're not probably accessible to everyone because they're very tax driven or they're very kind of like policy driven by the government, but it's worth exploring them.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add to that is that, you know, if you look at the business cases more holistically, you can look at that kind of triple bottom line benefit, you know, the social, the environmental and the financial benefits that investment decisions can unlock. I think the only other thing is I say that there's probably a shift in the traditional kind of return on investment boundaries is something that I'm seeing. So rather than trying to get a return on investment in, you know, 1 or 2 years, as organizations are now setting longer term objectives, they're perhaps taking a step back and going, no, actually, a bit of a longer return on investment is actually something that is more palatable than it might have been previously. And you know, there's lots of ways you can kind of portray that message and show that, you know, there are other benefits that you might not have considered.
Absolutely. Well, we're coming towards the end of our time, so I've got one last question before we go on to the one I mentioned before, and it's really talking about this move that we've seen over the past year to more remote working. How can employers encourage the reductions of emissions, meet sustainability targets and similar from their workplace when workplaces are moving increasingly more remotely? So I guess we're talking here about people working from home, people working perhaps in the hub and spoke hybrid model workplaces, and also city centre offices. How can organisations manage their sustainability objectives across these diverse spaces?
Well,
Yeah,
first
I
of
think,
all, you can say that looking at the workplace now is about looking at it in the sharing economy. So no matter where you are going, in the local hub, in your community, at the office or whatever, we share, we bring in a ratio, and we only use what we are using when we are using it, and then it's not standing empty. So it's also about, you know, tapping into local hubs that's actually sharing, maybe open up the doors to local communities so it can be used in evenings, in weekends, and so on. But look at how much can we share and optimize to reduce waste on all levels, and that's actually a decision you can take wherever you are and what you tap into.
Anybody else like to add to that?
Yeah, I think I actually did see quite an interesting study. I think it was last week or the week before, Kathy, and this particular study highlighted that actually remote working, in terms of working from home full time, has potentially got a bigger carbon footprint than being in the office, and that there's some seasonality in that. So if everybody it's essentially summer versus winter, and the reason for that is because that people's homes are unfortunately not as energy as efficient as some of the buildings that people tend to go into as part of their, you know, typical commute into the office. So I don't think there's certainly not a one size fits all, but if we can make both of those options as sustainable as possible, and, you know, try and provide renewable power, for example, at home for people via the workplace, and then also renewable power in the office as an example, and make the offices as efficient as possible, then you're going to have the best opportunity to minimize that. And of course, you've got the mobility part in between. So how are you getting to work? Are you doing that in an electric vehicle, or are you doing that in an old diesel? You know, those types of things are definitely going to be something to consider as well.
So I'm conscious that our time is pretty much up, and I'm very keen to keep us to time, as I'm sure our audience have other commitments today. So can I just ask the panel for their one word, which is the key ingredient to a sustainable workplace, which is a great question. So Geeta, your one word.
Decide to start now and do it. What can I do tomorrow when I come to my workplace?
That's a lot of words, but yes, great thought. Fran.
Oh, I have a few words. I would probably say awareness, because that really summarizes awareness of the planet, awareness of the behavior of the people. So for me, awareness.
Okay. Jamie.
I'm going to stick with the word that I put forward earlier, which was balance.
Balance. I think that's good. So thank you very much for our panel for taking part. I think we had a really great discussion there. Great to have it on Earth Day, which is such an important day for us all to recognise our sustainability commitments. We talked about sustainability not being optional anymore. It really is a necessity, and particularly as part of the war for talent. I think Jamie used the green weapon as in the war for talent, and as people come back to their workplaces, I think that's increasingly important. Fran mentioned at the moment, COVID hasn't been great. We've got empty buildings with nobody in them. But actually, I think over the course of the last 45 minutes, we've kind of agreed that COVID it's really accelerated the sustainability discussion and made it a lot more palatable to the board. We agree that finance is not a barrier anymore. In fact, you can save money by being more sustainable, which certainly wasn't the case 10 or 15 years ago. There are challenges to it. Sometimes it's harder to deliver than you think, and change is hard. Any type of change is hard. But the rewards, both for the organisation and for the individuals, really seem to trump that. So thank you very much for our panel for taking part, and obviously for the audience for being so engaged and posing so many questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to them all, but as Simon said at the beginning, this is the first in a regular series of webinars, so about the future workplace. So there'll be plenty more opportunities to continue the debate. And I recognise there were quite a few questions about the return to work, which I know we're going to be addressing very soon. So thank you very much, everyone. Thanks to our panel and thanks to our audience.